Alright, this is a video of me going through the process of making one of my pens. So as you can see here, I'm picking up the wood blanks that I'm going to be using to make these pens. I'm going to be making two pens. These are custom pens that have a saying engraved into the wood. So very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take it over to my table over here and get all the rest of the parts that I need in order to make the pen. Over here is where I keep the pen kits. All the hardware for pens come in these kits that you can purchase online. It's basically all the metal hardware that goes part of the pen, including the ink and the tubes. So here's the brass tubes that we are going to use that all the pen components fit into. Having a little problem shutting the drawer there. Alright, I got all my components. So now I need to take those wood blocks, which are called blanks, pen blanks, and I need to cut those blanks to the size of the brass tube. Now this little jig I have here takes a measurement of the brass tube and makes a corresponding measurement on the other side where I can put the actual wood pen blank, be able to cut it on my bandsaw to the exact size that I put in there. Alright, ready to cut. Alright, so the next process is taking these two cut pen blanks, determining where the center of them is, so that way I can drill a hole through these, which those brass tubes that I picked up are going to fit in. So here I am marking the center. Take them over to my drill press. I have a really efficient jig that I use to hold the pen blanks in, so that way they stay nice and straight when I'm drilling the hole. Got to make sure to get the right size drill bit for those brass tubes. Different pens come with different size brass tubes, so you'll always have to constantly change out your drill bits based on that. Make sure it's long enough as well. Tighten it down. Alright, and so this that I'm getting set up here is the actual, I guess you'd call it a pen blank vise. It's going to hold a piece of wood straight up, vertical. Put it in the center, line everything all up, and then proceed to drilling the hole through the wood. It's also really important to make sure that you get it lined up right dead in the center Otherwise, when you put the brass tube in later, it'll be crooked, and depending on how close to the edge you got when you have to line it up with the bushings that I use, it could be hanging over the edge and you won't be able to get a perfectly round pen, so you could blank if you don't do it correctly. So make sure that if you are going to make a pen and you're going through this process, make sure you get that hole directly in the center of the wood blank. Sorry for the bad camera angles. This is my first attempt at making a video, so still kind of figuring out the whole camera concept, and hopefully future videos I'll be able to improve a little bit and get you some better close-up shots. As you can see, perfect hole right in the center. Alright, so the next step is to take the blanks with the brass tubes, and you need to glue the brass tubes inside of the wood blank. Here I'm using some sandpaper and I'm scraping up the brass tubes because you don't want to have smooth brass tubes going in there because you need good adhesion. So scraping it up with some sandpaper makes it a good rough edge, so that way it'll stick inside the hole. Alright, so what I'm using is, it's called CA glue. And this can is a can of accelerator. It basically speeds up the process of the glue drying. So you just put some glue on the brass tube, put it in one end of the pen blank. I usually twist it around and then I'll completely insert it in the other end, making sure that it's completely inside of the wood pen blank. And I'll continue the step with the second one. It'd probably be a good idea to wear gloves, but I never seem to remember to do that, so I end up getting super glue all over my hands. Now I'm going to go ahead and spray the tips with that accelerator. I usually give 3 squirts on both sides, and then I just let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, just to make sure it's completely dry before moving on to the next step. Alright, so I mentioned bushings earlier in the video. So in order to get the pen to be the right size to fit the hardware, you need to use what is called bushings. Depending on which pen kit you get, every pen's a different size. You need to have those, and that's what you're going to put on the lathe with the pen blank to get it to the correct size. So here I am just getting those ready, getting it set up over here. By the way, this is my cheap, around $200 Harbor Freight wood lathe, mini wood lathe. It's for itself many times over already. Basically it's around 200 bucks at Harbor Freight, but it actually works like a champ. I have no complaints with it. Eventually I'd like to get a variable speed one, but for now it's doing its job. So now I got those pen blanks, and I to basically sand them down that the brass just tips over to the side. So how I'm going to do that is with this disc sander. You put the pen blank with the brass tube in the hole that I'm getting set up right here, basically. I don't know what you would call it, but you just put it in there, and then you line it up with the disc sander and just sand it until it's dead even with the brass. You'll see what I'm saying here shortly. Just got to make sure you hold on to the pen jig and the brass tube or the pen blank pretty tight during this process, because that disc sander is spinning pretty fast, and if you're not keeping a good grip on it, very easy to let it fly away from you. But here I am checking to make sure it's even, and as you can see, I just flipped it real quick. You can see the shiny part of the brass tube peeking out, so I know that end is good. So now I'm just checking the second side, making sure all four sides are nice and square and nice and even. Alright, the next step is to mount it on the lathe. So you get the bushing on there on one end, put the pen blank on next, and then you put the opposite side of the bushing on the other end. Adding a couple other spacers in there just so that way I can take up the whole end of the lathe there, and then go ahead and tighten everything down. Make sure to wear face, eye, and hearing protection when using the lathe. The last thing you want to do is not have that on you and a piece of wood come flying at you at a pretty fast speed. Could put you in the hospital real quick. But here I am, I'm kind of putting it in fast motion because this process takes a little while. But here I am trimming it down to its right size. Making sure to get the edges so it's nice and smooth. Both sides. And basically shaping it so it looks like a pen. Alright, I'll complete the process on the second one. Another thing you want to make sure you do is when you are using the cutter on the lathe, make sure you have positive control against the tool stop. You do not want to have the cutter free floating while you're making these cuts, because it's very easy to lose control of it and it could go flying. So, just be really safe when doing this process. It has the potential to be pretty dangerous, but if you are concentrating on what you're doing and trying to stay safe, you shouldn't have too much of a problem. So right now, if you see me digging inside the lathe, that is because I need to change the speed, because I'm already done cutting. So the next step that I'm going to be doing is sanding. I need to sand these blanks so that they're nice and smooth, there's no chips in them, and this will just make it easier for when I go with the next step, which is going to be using the laser to laser engrave a customer's wanted phrase on it. So when I'm doing this sanding as well, I'm actually going through 5 different grits, starting at 150 up to, I think it's 200 or 220. and then it's like 320, 400, and then finally 600. Um, while I'm doing this, I'm also sanding back and forth with the lathe off, just to lay down the grain and make it a very smooth surface. Alright, what you see me doing right here is I'm actually pouring a little layer of CA glue onto a blue paper towel and then wiping it across the pen blank. This is to make the blank a little bit more sturdy. Wood has a tendency to kind of be chippy sometimes, so laying a good layer of CA glue kind of hardens the wood, and it makes it easier when going through the process. I also spray the activator kind of like I did earlier. That just makes it dry a lot quicker. Let it sit for a couple minutes. Alright, seems to be dry. Alright, on to the next step. So this is my little pen laser. Basically, it's a $200 Chinese laser I bought online. And I bought this little attachment that goes to it that you actually, it's like a rotator for the laser. So you basically screw the pen blank on in there in the center. On the software, you put the text of what you want on there, get it all centered out, which is what I'm doing right now. That's why you see the laser going back and forth. I'm trying to make sure I'm dead center, so it's not off to one side or not printing right. So here's the start of that process. As you can see, it's a laser in the text into the pen blank right now. This pen says Pops. There's a second one that I'm doing as well, and it's going to say Mom. So Mom and Pops, this was a customer's request. So this is what it looks like after it's been engraved. And then here's the second one. Alright, back over to the lathe. Putting another layer of CA glue on it now because that laser can leave a little burnt and kind of charred surface. So by putting some CA glue on it, you kind of seals all that open engraving and makes it really smooth. Spray it with the activator again as well. Also, now I'm giving it a quick sand just to get any of that leftover CA glue that's not inside of the actual engraving off, so that way I can get back to the bare wood. And now I'm going to go through the process of doing the finish. There's different ways you can finish a pen. Some people actually use a CA glue finish. I did that for a while. It's a little bit of a pain to put on, and if you don't do it right, it can crack. Weather conditions can play a factor in it as well. So what I've actually switched to with my wood pens is using a friction finish. So I got two different finishes I use. One is, I think it's called like Triple E, and it's like a wax that you put on there. And then I follow it up with this liquid finish that I'm dropping on now. Basically rub it into the pen blank until it's nice and smooth and hardened on there. And then just kind of keep going back and forth until it's nice and shiny. And there you go. Mom. Alright, the final process is putting the actual pen together. So those hardware pieces that I got earlier, take them all out of the bags. And this contraption you see right here is I'm not really sure what it's called. It's kind of like a pen vise itself, but it's really just used to put all the pieces on. It's like a kind of a clamp. It pushes everything together. So you just follow the directions that come on the pen kit, and once you're done, you have a complete pen. There's one. I'm just wrapping up the second one now. Obviously I'm doing this in fast motion because this takes a little bit of time as well. You want to be careful to make sure you do this right. It's really easy to screw this part up. I know, I've done it plenty of times. Many screw ups. But there they are. There's two pens. And this is the finished product. So thank you everybody for watching. I hope to do some more videos again in the future.